Ronald, welcome to Woodbury House. Welcome to Mr. Wonderful.
Yes, Mr. Wonderful himself, Richard.
Absolutely. So what we've got up here is 5 works from the Nightlife series created in 1985. What do you think about these particular works on display?
I like them because obviously they look like Richard.
Yeah.
And what's interesting are the different poses.
Yeah.
Because I would definitely think of Richard as a dandy.
Absolutely.
Even though you might, other may not, because he had a very long life, and obviously as it went along, he was not dandyish. But in this early period,
Yep.
and I think that was one of the things we shared. We were similar types. And what I really like about this is the different poses showing actual character.
Yeah.
It's not as though they're just, a silhouette. I mean, you actually can feel him in the posing of them, and here with the legs.
Yeah. They've all got
I mean, I'm
something
not
different.
sure exactly what he has in his hand up there. It almost looks like a dagger.
Or a shield.
Or a shield, or exactly. As a shield, it's quite interesting.
Yeah.
Because it's as if he's going into a pose. And as Nightlife, he's not dancing, but actually it could be different poses of him. Like when I'm in the photo with him, we're sort of in a pose.
Yeah.
So I would say both of us were very into posing in that sense and being very alone.
Yeah.
So what's interesting is that he is alone, and it would be him, say, maybe hanging out somewhere. This one is very interesting because he's almost levitating.
Yep.
He's not truly touching the ground, which is sort of who Richard is. He sort of was living in his own world. So that one I would say is interesting from the levitation. This is sort of a shield, no photos today. And the other two, I'm not really sure what he's up to over here. He may have something in his hand.
Yeah, he looks like he's holding something.
And it's interesting because every pose is extremely different.
Yeah.
Right? None of them are a repetition of the same attitude.
Yeah.
So basically they're all different attitudes that Richard would give.
Yeah.
Because I know in the early days we have a lot of photos with him outside of the Guggenheim and an opening with Andy Warhol.
Yeah.
And Andy always wanted to do a portrait of him, but Richard refused, which is quite interesting because you would think everyone wants an Andy photo.
Yeah.
So we have a lot of black and white photos of me with Richard and Andy and whatever, but it's interesting because he would never allow himself to have a portrait by Andy. So it's like Richard does his own portrait and nobody else. So as an opening statement, it's great. You get to see him hanging out at a club somewhere and a lot of different poses and attitudes because Richard's about attitude.
Absolutely.
In the early days, definitely about attitude.
And the work is actually done on Japanese kimwashi paper. So it's a very thin paper.
Oh, right. I can see this up close now.
And if you see the creases, it folds down and this booklet closes.
Oh, that's how it becomes a book.
Yes.
I mean, not a book, but a sort of a series. No,
Series.
I couldn't see that in the...
That booklet then goes into a cased wooden box, which Richard wrote about his Nightlife series. They're all numbered out of the 53, all original. The booklet is signed and numbered, and so is the case box. So it's a really important work, and we believe it's perhaps one of his transition body of works. And his probably narrative to the wider world was, I'm done with the streets, I'm probably going to be going more canvas works from here on in, but this is perhaps a body of work that can be deployed in both settings. It could be classified as street because you can walk off with it, but it could be a gallery work if you frame it as such.
Right, and it's actually the moment when he goes from a figure, which is not Richard, the scary figure on the street, which he did everywhere in Berlin and whatever, and now it becomes him. I think that's what's really important about my piece in the other room is that it's Richard, and it's not a character to scare somebody. I mean, he could scare you, but he then becomes the self-portrait in a painting.
Absolutely.
Which is a complete transition from a character on the street that would shock you, which was his first idea actually, to do something shocking on the street that would bring your attention to a figure. This is now a transition into his own self-portrait and into painting.
Really exciting.
And even the use of the material is very delicate and painting-like.
Absolutely. And then we've got these seascapes. You told me something very interesting about these when you first come in. So we believe, someone said before, that Mr. Ken Moss, that perhaps the black line paint stroke coming up was to make it look not as perfect. You've got a different take on that.
Yeah, my take is obviously Richard was on heroin and used the needle basically almost his whole life.
Yeah.
And what I see this is the sprouting of the blood, I guess when you pull the needle out.
Yeah.
Right, and that is consistent all the way through all of his work from this point on. So instead of this obviously just disrupting it, which it obviously disrupts it from being a perfect landscape, it really is definitely the image of the spurting of the blood coming from the hypodermic needle.
I can see it, absolutely.
This type of image will then run everywhere. You'll see it's a certain form of action,
yeah,
and it will be everywhere, even in the big painting. Whenever things are disrupted, it's always going to be the needle, and because this is a disruption of him.
So he's energetic, conscious.
Yeah, his own physical disruption. So I think definitely that's what this image is in these, and it's very beautiful.
They're beautiful.
I mean, they're very beautiful, as opposed to having just a plain landscape.
Yeah.
That alone are really nice. This way, again, it's him. That's his blood. So we can get back to the idea of the self-portrait.
He's leaving his own mark within
right,
that.
he is this is Richard's blood spurting. So this is a landscape with Richard. There are more self-portraits.
Yeah, yeah.
Actually, that's what we're always dealing with. I'm not so sure to the falling figure or the jumping figure or whatever the figure. I think this is more related then to the graffiti.
Yeah.
Because it's about a shocking image.
Yeah.
These are not shocking, they're Richard. But these, I would say all of them, I mean, it could even be him because he loved to wear this pork pie hat.
Yeah.
That hat was a very thing. So this one is more like a dancing figure.
Yeah.
But very often when it's falling or jumping, I think it's more related back to the original graffiti figure.
Okay.
Right? A sense of shock as opposed to a self-portrait. In the end, this is going to become the whole theme. Is it a street figure or is it Richard doing a self-portrait and moving again into the painting concept as opposed to the graffiti concept?
So this one is 1983, it's battle scene. So we can see there's a shadow figure, there's a gun and he's got a helmet on, it's an army figure, right? And we've got these toy soldiers within the piece.
Right.
What's interesting to me is he goes over to the Berlin Wall the following year in '84 and does 17 life-size shadow men on that wall.
Right.
Is he aware of conflict that's happening in the world at that time and he wanted to put his shadow figure in that moment perhaps? And that's why there's a war-esque figure.
Yeah, that's a great idea actually, because we have the Berlin Wall and these are obviously very political.
Yeah.
Because it is a soldier and they're at war and it's about destruction.
He's painting perhaps there what's going on in the world at that time.
Well, it would definitely be a reference to form of war, but
Yeah.
83, 84, I don't know on an American level. Obviously, it's not Vietnam, we're way past that. Eventually, I'm going to talk about him being at war with himself in the next room.
Perhaps let's lead on from
Maybe
there.
we go there.
American Rodeo 1984 is the title of the piece. It's super vibrant, it's super eccentric, there's lots going on. If we peel really, really closely within, which you don't see from afar, is this red.
A lot of red, yeah. People would think of this as the Marlboro Man, which is a very famous image that Richard Prince used and uses to this day. So I think when people would see the horse and rider, they think it's a reference to the American West or that Marlboro Man image, which is very American. However, because Richard was a heroin addict, the nickname for heroin is horse. So for me, it's Richard fighting his addiction or struggling with his addiction.
Losing control.
Right, losing control. How far can he make it? When will he be thrown?
Yeah.
Now, he never got thrown. He lived many, many years. Most addicts die young, I would think, of an overdose. Richard never did.
Such as Basquiat?
Right, exactly. So I think that's the reason for all the red.
Yeah.
Because every time we see the red in Richard's work, other than in a landscape, it's definitely a reference to the blood.
Yeah.
Because he continues to use this image and actually does paintings with the blood itself at one point. I think everyone fights addiction. I don't think anyone chooses to be an addict.
Yeah.
So once you become involved in it, here he is. So for me, the horse paintings are really a reference to Richard fighting his addiction and how far can he go. So even though it's this all-American image, for him, I think it's about him and his addiction, if you know the word horse is a reference to heroin. And even this, it's like blood splattered.
Yeah.
You know, splattered. I mean, where is he? He's falling, he's caught in between space, he doesn't know where he is. He's high, the blood is rushing. So this could be him at the highest moment, you know, when you go into ecstasy on the heroin. Obviously, you do it for a reason because it puts you into like a very high state. So I would see this one as Richard. He's been thrown from the horse. He's here flying through air now, and the blood is splattering, and he is like in a state of ecstasy in a way. So it's sort of a fantastic combination.
Yeah.
As a story of him from the horse shooting up, the blood splattering, and now I'm flying. I'm flying in ecstasy. So it's an incredible, and even the cut, you know, makes it so conformed, so that you get a different sense of energy because of the shape of the canvas as well. So for me, it's a fantastic wall, you know, of Richard on the horse fighting and being thrown, flying through space and blood splattering. Fantastic wall.
Complements each other really well.
Yeah, totally, as if it's one part of the same story.
So what we've got here is a lot of people obviously refer to Richard as the Shadow Man, and we know he created many of them works throughout his career. But what many people are perhaps not as au fait with is he done shadow women. Now, why we know it's a shadow woman, the leg pose is as such. We can see the bracelets, a necklace, and the earrings. What are you seeing from this piece, and what do you think of it?
Well, I see the same. I don't remember ever seeing the women. And I'm not sure who was posing for them, but it's obviously a woman by the body and by the jewelry. So I would say it's probably Meta, but again, he does the crazy hair, which is this energy. It's a source of energy exploding.
Do we think this is the same woman?
I don't know. It could be. I mean, I don't think there were a lot of women posing.
I think it is.
I would say it is, because these are very rare. I've never even seen them. I would say it is. It's just a different angle. One is forward and one's to the side. So the head looks a little different only because it's a different angle. But I would say it's probably the same, and it could be Meta, you know, because she was always with him. And if anyone was going to be the model, it would be her. And
this one in the middle, Black Forest, 1983. Talk to me, thoughts, what are you thinking when you look at that? Well, there's a lot going on there for me.
There is. I mean, obviously the background is very, very complex and whatever, but what I just saw, which is unusual, is a Christ figure because of the way the arms are spread.
Yes.
Now, I didn't think of that till I was just looking at it right now.
Now you point it out,
So obviously Richard felt that this is early though. What year?
83.
Okay. So the Christ figure obviously is someone that's being tortured for a reason. It's almost as if he's being martyred.
Yeah. Okay.
Right? So by this point, now don't forget, he was going to jump off the Empire State Building.
That was his dream.
Right. That was his original way of getting famous in New York. So here are the arms. This could be it. Because what's this? It looks like a tall building almost.
Yeah.
In a weird way.
Yeah, I can see it.
So if we really need a story, I would say this is Richard on top of the Empire State Building, and his dream has come. However, it never came, so he went on a lot farther than 83. So for 83, this really could be a portrait of Richard jumping from the Empire State Building, his dream to become famous in New York, which didn't happen, but here he is. So he did paint it, but he didn't actually do it.
And what I've noticed is the paint seems to be a hell of a lot thicker on here. You can see it from afar. There's a lot sticking there.
Loaded up with painting. So it's super expressionistic, which was very popular at the moment. But this is way beyond expressionistic. I mean, it is in the sense that it feels like that, but it does not look like an expressionist painting. But I love that idea now of him, because look, it looks like he's on a balcony
or a bar
and about to jump. So, and it also has this, which shows a lot of height, you know, almost as if there were buildings behind it, and he's at the top of the building, the rail. So here he is on the rail at the top of the building, and I'm about to go. And of course, the turmoil that he would be feeling would be intense. Really intense, and he had built up so much energy up to this point coming to New York that this would be perfect to represent that image.
Absolutely.
So I love the idea of that being that image.
And we've got again the pink, which moves us nicely into this. He liked to put that element of colour in there, didn't he?
Yeah, he did a show. Our gallery was in 560 Broadway, and as I was telling you, our neighbor was Salvatore Alla.
Yep.
And Richard had his last really big, magnificent show there, and they were all pink landscapes. So this pink color is definitely coming from the early 80s. It was a color he loved. Now this is sort of, we'll move back to here, a very miniature little version of one of these pink landscapes. The originals were giant, they were spectacular. So I would say this is a reference to those original pink landscapes. And here he's dealing with a formal painting. So now we're really dealing with painting. Because as in that, this straight line is a reference to Barney Newman, who was an classic American painter. And he always used this line to define his landscape. And Richard was very fond of his work. So the line, I would always say, is a reference to that. And that's where the line came from. Even though others have said it disrupts the painting. It could be, but for me, it makes it a formal presentation.
And for me, this really, really shows his artistic skill set. You know, Godfather of Street Art, yeah, we know he's referred to as that. This is true artistic art.
No, an incredible painter.
Yeah.
I mean, who makes this? It looks like a photo.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. And I think you mentioned earlier, when you compare that to the other early guys of the era, did they have that artistic competence to be able to do something of that ability?
No, no one was really a painter. You know, Keith Haring really is a gay icon. Yeah. And I know it's horrible. For me, it's almost gay kitsch. Yeah. And if it wasn't for Tony Shafrazi really promoting this, his most interesting work to me were the subway pieces for Keith Haring. And it's taken years, almost to now, for them to actually say they're real. You know, and they were the toughest, best work I think that Keith Haring ever did. And it would be closer to something like this, because it's a piece of paper, a quick drawing, and he's a painter. But no more after that. And for Basquiat, originally, I mean, he uses paint, but again, it's really very expressionistic, and it's always a reference to black culture. Richard is the only one who is a true painter. And that's why we have this period where he goes from street to serious painter. And a brilliant painter, obviously. You can look at it, you would assume it's a photo, but it's fantastic painting. The whole use of it's unbelievable, right? The use of the painting. It's special.
It's really special. And I think people perhaps not au fait with Hambleton would look at a Shadow Man figure and that painting next to it, they wouldn't think it's the same artist.
No, probably
it's so
not.
Diverse,
unless you know his work,
you know?
Then you would, yeah.
And I think that diverse ability of what he was able to create at that level of excellence is really testament to his artistic merit, you know?
Totally, and it's fantastic. I mean, you see the sunset or the sunrise.
It's beautiful.
I mean, you can't really get a better painting than that as far as a realistic version of a sunset or a landscape.
It reminds me as if like you're looking, you know, when you're on the plane, you're looking out the plane window.
Yeah, it is.
That's
it has
I'm
that
seeing.
form of light. It almost has that exact form of light when you're looking out of a plane window, exactly.
And he was traveling a lot in this time period, so this is 86.
Totally, he's flying, yeah, a lot. It's true, because you only have sky and sea, and sky and sea are the same material. You know, there's no land. And so this actually sort of does bring it down to earth, you know, because you're seeing more sky or a sunset from a plane. And so this grounds it in a very serious way, as opposed to being an ephemeral floating image. So you have that, then he grounds it with those lines.
It's really beautiful, I like that. And then we've got I Only Have Eyes for You. So many people are probably not aware that Richard pre-Shadow Men pasted these up all across the city of New York. When they faded due to natural causes, wind, rain, whatever it may be, left a white silhouette figure, and that's perhaps where he got the inspiration for the actual Shadow Man figures.
For the black one.
Do you remember seeing these?
I did. I loved them. And actually, since I just mentioned the Keith Haring subway paintings, this would be a parallel.
Yeah.
Actually, a direct parallel to when Keith did those, and then Richard was doing these.
Yeah.
And again, the idea that it's there and then it disappears and it becomes a shadow.
Yeah, yeah.
Or actually not even a shadow.
Silhouette type thing.
Silhouette,
yeah.
Exactly. So these are great. I mean, this is his entry to New York.
Did it grab attention?
Oh yeah, totally. Obviously, it would even more than, well, the black figure does because you're walking alone at night or something, and it's like, whoa, what's that? However, this, it would be like the Keith Haring, but more so because it's Richard himself.
Yeah, yeah.
And of course, I Only Have Eyes for You. We're back to the original Dandy, the character. It's Richard, look at me.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, it's like conceptually, he's not really looking for like attention in that sense, but he wants you to know he's there.
Yeah.
I've arrived in New York and here I am everywhere. On every block you're going to find me, and I'm here. Well, it could be everywhere.
Yeah.
I don't remember which one was, but he would try to get them to be everywhere.
Yeah.
Because it announces, all right, I'm out of Canada, I've done the other things, now I'm in New York and look at me. I only have eyes for you. Look at me. So the eyes are his eyes and he's looking at you. And they're a brilliant conceptual thing. And it's a continuation of the street work, which is not really about graffiti. It's really conceptual installation.
Use of street.
Yeah, it's not. He's using the street as a canvas to do a conceptual installation.
Yeah.
It's not graffiti.
Absolutely.
As if this, you put that up, it's not a piece of graffiti. It's a conceptual installation, but using the street as his canvas.
Much the same as mass murder.
Yeah, very much so.
Many consider it street art, but he was only using the street for a mechanism and a form to provoke and grab attention in an artistic form.
Right, and to let the art world know I'm here, or let the whole world know I'm here.
And he did.
Because he wasn't limiting himself to the art world in any way. He really was like, here I am in New York, now I'm going to make my big statement. And obviously, we didn't jump off the Empire State Building. So instead, we'll paste my picture up everywhere, and you know I'm here, and I'm here to stay.
Yeah, yeah. And he looks sharp here.
Yeah, he does. He does. I mean, he was always very nicely dressed, you know, as I said, and the hat. He always had like this pork pie hat, which is the one there. So that explosion is sort of a combination, not with the girls, that's the hair, but definitely I love that, like the little headpiece on there being.
What's he grabbing here?
Well, it looks like he's going for a gun, actually.
Yeah, you think gun?
Well, I think he's still trying to scare you.
Many people have said that. Many
yeah,
people
for
have
me,
said gun
what would
in the
you go to your pocket? You would pull a gun out.
Yeah, and his eyes, they do look scary.
Well, he's gone. I mean, he's very, very gone there. He's either high or hysterical.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, well, I'm still here. Should I pull a gun out and shoot myself? How far will I get? I'm not jumping off the Empire State Building, but I'm here, I've got the gun, I'm like ready to go. Where do we go from here? So it's like, yeah, he could be pulling a gun out, definitely. And that's sort of the threatening part, because he likes to be threatening and to shake up whoever's looking at it for that work.
We've got another one on the other side, which is overlooking the masterpiece. And I think this situation which we've curated here, talk us through what you're seeing from that.
Well, what I love about it is for my piece, I really think of it as Richard, but in a state which is different from anything else he's ever done. To me, it's very, very ephemeral, and he's very at peace. So for me, he's really going into the wilderness or into the horizon, but he's not upset. He's also fading out, you know, because there's no more leg or anything. Here, it's the full body, he's arrived, but here, to me, it's like an incredible, like one of the most beautiful landscapes, although all the big paintings have these incredibly beautiful landscapes. But because he's sort of fading away, I like to think of it as Richard in eternity, in actually a more peaceful manner than most of the work, which is like very exuberant. But we still got the drops, You know, a couple of drops of blood here, which define who he is.
Some lovely splatters off the
Yeah,
back that's
the
bringing it to life
splattering
there.
all over here. You know, actually, weirdly enough, this almost looks a little bit like those palm trees or something up there that, you know, where you had them, the other paintings with those palm trees, which I'm not sure, what year were those Miami things?
85.
So only the next
1985,
year.
yeah.
So they, in a weird way, have a feeling of that. There's something to me that's very peaceful, even though it's very explosive.
Yeah.
So it's very, very different.
And we can see so many different layers to it. So we look here, there's something going on here, there's building blocks, and then we're back in, and it's so vibrant.
Yeah, the painting and the layering of the painting is really exquisite in this one. You know, because it's not that obvious till you get there. But look, every single mark. I mean, this is a painting. This doesn't happen on its own. So any little section you look at is really a beautiful painting, or the marking here. So it was the Expressionist period in New York, the whole big revival. So you have that, but then it's always about him. And then like a little scratch, you know, I'm here, pull. I mean, it's just extraordinary as a painting, I think.
Absolutely. We're going to come back to this one. We're going to talk more in depth about it and your relationship with Richard. Let's carry on walking the show. Shadow Cat, 1982. Richard, in his career, done a lot of cats.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Why? Did he like cats?
I think the cat represents him
Okay.
as an animal, because I have one at home as well, a gold cat.
Right.
And I always see him in it, because they usually have these, well, look, it's very worked up, and usually, I mean, my face is really like out there. And also a black cat, if you see it on the street, it's like it scares you. So I think it's the idea of the black cat and the history of a black cat. If you see one on the street, that's bad luck, right? So it's scary, it's a black cat, and I think it's really a reflection of him.
Mischievous?
Very mischievous,
Yes.
very. And of course, he puts so much character into these cats. My cat came, we were in the 560 building where he had his last show upstairs, the Gold Show. So what he would do is he would come by on the bike with a bunch of cats, or no, cats and heads. Those were what he would sell. So he would come to the gallery.
His little red bike?
On the bike, exactly. Come into the gallery and then put them all over the floor. So you had to buy one or he wouldn't leave, right? So I'm like, Richard, please, this is an open gallery, right? So I like them. As I said, it's a street image, because you would see the black cat on the street and it would be bad luck or whatever. So I think it relates very directly to the shadow figure, right? It's another version of the shadow figure, but with a character that also represents something scary.
Mischievous,
Because obviously
naughty.
the shadow figure is going to scare you. If you see a black cat, it's like, oh, I'm finished.
Yeah, I get it.
So it's sort of the same idea, but represented as a cat.
And it's a very good example, that cat. I particularly like it. You can tell it's an early work. There's a lot of rawness about it. Good example of it.
Yeah, all the early cats are fantastic.
So this is where we can meet and greet clients. So these are the Miami pieces that you were just on about.
Oh, my God, it looks like a frightening skull.
1984, 1985.
All right, so again, this bit of palm is, I think, in that corner up there. It feels like that bit of palm.
It does.
So he obviously there was something about this Miami that stayed with him, at least for a year or two.
Yeah.
But this is like frightening.
Yeah.
I mean, literally a frightening head.
It is. You can actually see a little bit more as you come back.
Yeah, I didn't really ever.
The closer you get, it gets harder
it goes
to
away.
work out.
But from here, I mean, he's frightening. That could be the most frightening face I've ever seen in one of his paintings. And look, the two shootings on the side. Again, the spurt of blood, although it's black, and then you've got the pink in the background again. That's like his signature landscape color is the pink.
Now, I haven't seen too much of that royal blue color.
No, that's very unusual, so I'm not really sure where that came from, so there must be some Miami reference where that blue came from, unless because the ocean is there.
Maybe.
I mean, it's not the color of an ocean.
No, it seems a lot more dark and aggressive, though. Like you said, the faces, you know?
It's all within this splatter. So there's something about this blue, why he's using it, which I truly don't know. But there's definitely something here. I don't know if it came from Miami, because that's blue. And that's much more peaceful. It's like him sitting somewhere with a little palm tree. But this, frightening. He could be demon possessed by the drug.
It looks like that to me. It's some devil type character, whether that's him, whether that's somebody else. But
because
it's a
you
monster
have the
that's been
double
created
shooting
within Miami.
with the blood, and then this very dark blue, very serious. This almost is like the demon itself that possesses him, the drug demon. That to me would be what this is. The double shooting, the royal blue for some reason he's chosen, and the demon character. Here he is in a palm tree, beautiful setting, and this demon is controlling him. He needs to shoot up.
Can't be contained.
I think that would be the best of that. And this, he seems just sort of calm, sitting somewhere.
He's under the trees. It's a little bit more pleasant now,
yeah, it's
isn't it?
almost like this is him in Miami having a pleasant afternoon.
But that being said, is there
But
something
again, you've
coming out
got,
of him in the arm?
yeah, look at the arm, exactly.
Why is the arm out in that stance?
Yeah, why is this like here? So again, and then you've got, you know, a little bit of the splatter.
It's a beautiful piece.
It is. It feels peaceful. So it could be just after he shot up and he's there at peace.
Yeah.
The palm tree, him, he's feeling nothing, and he's just there with the arm still out.
And this is a jacket, Richard's old jacket,
Oh, his own.
that he used to paint with. And he done a Shadow Man figure on the reverse of it, which is kindly framed. I think it's a special piece. It's signed over the signature. We just leave this behind the bar as if Richard is the barman.
He's the barman. All right, I love the idea. I mean, yeah, I like him here as the barman.
It's quite a cool concept. I'm here with Ronald Sosinski. We've just had a walk round of Mr. Wonderful exhibition at Woodbury House. Mr. Wonderful is an exhibition of works by Richard Hamilton that he created in the time period, the 1980s. Ronald has been fantastic help in helping us put this showcase together and providing us with the masterpiece that sits behind us now, Mr. Wonderful 1984. It's a spectacular piece which we're going to talk about the importance of the work in more depth shortly. But for now, Ronald, would you just introduce yourself, the 80s scene, ex-gallerist, who you are, what you've been up to, and how you come into context or communication with Richard and the creation of this masterpiece?
We would start probably with 1984 and the gallery itself.
Yep.
So I had lived in New York for all of the 70s, but in the 70s I was a conceptual artist. I did photography from television, and basically I spent all my time doing my own work.
Okay.
However, in 1981, I met my now partner, and I had also had galleries in Soho.
Yep.
Well, I sort of had them everywhere in the 80s, in the West Village, but that was fashion oriented, and then one in the Lower East Side, so sort of all around New York. In 1981, I met my partner, Ellen Donahue. She had just come from Sotheby's in London, and it was her birthday. It was actually an inauguration of Ronald Reagan. So here we're really going into a new financial, cultural period in New York in the 80s.
Okay.
So we met in 81. The first project we did together was a museum in Pennsylvania where I grew up in Bucks County, with the Museum of American Folk Art. So Ellen was getting her master's in folk art, and she actually has a master's with street art in New York. That's what she did her master's in, because when we met, I introduced her to the artist I knew at that time. So she did that. We had the museum in Pennsylvania for 2 years, 82 and 83. So I had been living in New York already since 1969, so it really was my home. When I came back to New York officially in 1984, we opened a contemporary gallery in our apartment. We had a very famous show there that was called Stencil and Spray.
Okay.
So this now ties into graffiti.
Yep.
So that show was 2 artists, James Romberger, who's very famous for comic book work to this day, and Michael Roman. Michael Roman did Madonna's hat box for Desperately Seeking Susan.
Wow.
So he was very famous for this skull image.
Okay.
So, you know the hat box in Desperate?
Yeah.
So he did that, and he did the van.
Brilliant.
So she was involved getting her master's, and then I showed Michael Roman. James did a lot of stencil work, and a lot of people did stencil work at that time, other artists, because it was very popular because of graffiti.
And it was quick to do.
And it's very fast to do. So I did that show in '84 as well, the stencil and spray. So that involved me as well as her in the graffiti movement. That was the moment when Keith Haring was doing the Subway series. I don't remember when he opened the Pop Shop, and there was another gallery, Fun Gallery, where Keith showed.
Yep.
So that was the beginning of my involvement with, say, graffiti.
Yep.
So at that point, Richard had already done, let's see, what year did he do the Berlin Wall?
84.
All right, so this is all that year. It's like the peak for Richard of No Way. So he did the Berlin Wall and the Venice Biennale he was involved in. So I did that show, and then I did this other show called Neo New Now Now. Now, there was a going joke that Ellen wanted Richard to make an above the sofa painting, which is like every artist will run when you tell them you want an above the sofa painting. So we had this going joke. So when I did Neo New Now Now, Richard said, all right, now I'll do the above the sofa painting. Well, it was hardly above the sofa because it's 8 foot tall.
Yeah.
And it was the entire height of the room. So there could be no sofa in front of it. But we were finally working together. He was going to do a show. I've never represented Richard because obviously he was too difficult. But as a friend, he was great because we were both similar. We were very shy. We were always out. We were always dressed. But we couldn't deal with people. I was never into it. He wasn't into it. And I still don't like even the word dealer.
Yeah.
Because dealer to me is like whatever. So I'm really a curator.
Yeah.
I consider myself an artist and a curator. So when I did the Neo New Now Now, Richard said, all right, well, now you get your painting. So I said, so I designed the painting with Richard. I didn't make the painting, but because we were very close friends, I was able to ask Richard for everything I wanted in the painting. So I wanted a masterpiece, and I knew the landscape work as a painter was extraordinary. This was really who he was, and this is where his talent was. Conceptually, his talent was in shaking up the world, because Richard really liked to shake things up.
Yeah.
So he had already done the Shadow Man figure, and way before this, he had done the body on the street with the red
Mass murder
paint
series.
throw, with the mass murder, exactly. And even before that, it was the mail order stuff.
Yeah.
All right, so all of this I knew. I had a very close friend, Ed Baynard. He was a very conservative painter, and he showed with a gallery in Soho called Milliken. So at that point, he knew Richard and David as well. So he invited them to do a group show at his gallery, which was very conservative American painting. Mm-hmm. So they did one group show, and then invited Richard to do a solo show, which never happened.
Right.
Obviously, because it was Richard. And this gallery was in no way. I mean, we're talking established New York figure, whatever. So that never happened. But it did bring Richard and David into the art world.
Yeah.
And then eventually other things happened. So now we could look it up. It's very early in the 80s. So that was my original contact. I was one of the artists that Ed sort of brought into the New York art world. So mine was conceptual photography. Richard at that point was known for the street work, but obviously was a painter. So the gallery could have been good, but obviously could not handle him. And David really was a lot of street work, a lot of homosexual street work as well, and incredible paintings that were a combination of painting, collage, and whatever, but rough work like Basquiat.
Yep.
I would really consider Richard a refined painter, a very high level painter. So that is our original contact.
Yep.
And then once I opened the gallery, obviously, I had, and this was, the Neo New Now was the opportunity to make this piece of work. So this work, obviously I wanted the figure, but I didn't want the street figure. I wanted a self-portrait of Richard.
So that
So
figure
this
there,
is a self-portrait of Richard. And the hat, he had this pork pie hat, which sort of went with these ragged coats he wore in the studio. So he always had that. So I wanted that, because for me, that was him, that hat and him and that weird smirk of his and maybe some kind of weird pose or whatever. So this is a self-portrait that I requested of him by him, but not really a copy of a shadow man. Really a beautiful self-portrait of what I call Richard's soul, the human soul. Because this is my contact with Richard, that we both have a certain level of the soul that we have brought to our human bodies and who we really are as characters.
he definitely seems more at peace, that figure there, doesn't he?
Yeah,
Looking
very
out,
much.
It looks like he's a relaxed state, calm state, and he's taking his surroundings of what he's witnessing all around him. That's what I'm feeling.
It's very different than any figure that you're ever going to find that Richard ever made. So I thought of this last night. So this is our human soul combination, the two of us.
Okay.
And so that's the figure itself. The landscape obviously is stunningly beautiful, so there's no way I was not having that.
Yeah.
The straight line, is another American painter, Barney Newman.
In relation to the black line, yeah?
Yeah, the black line itself. So that's a classic New York painter, established master. So I said, this is going to be a masterwork. I definitely want that. And then the red tape is another artist, Barbara Kruger, who was just coming into her own at that time. Mm-hmm. And she just had a huge show at MoMA in New York. So she's still going, but she deals with words, right? So she does sculpture, huge outdoor installations of words. I won't quote any of them, but what made her work distinctive was she used the red tape. So I said, well, I want the red tape because that will define the year. Actually, the red tape in a way defines the year because it's the reference to her. So that's the red tape, the black mark, the landscape, and the Richard figure. So bingo, there we have it.
And Richard, when you was running this past him, was he in total agreement about all of the different elements that would create the perfect work?
That's right. So that's why I don't really consider myself a dealer, because if any dealer attempted this, it never would have happened. So I really came at it as an artist. And eventually I am a curator, but that was one of the first shows I ever did. Right, in '84, that was a brand new gallery. We had the renegade space because it was in our apartment. So everything tied in. We had the graffiti, we had the personal friend, and as I said, I approached this as an artist to an artist.
And your dream together was to create the best work that had all of the different components that created the best possible masterpiece Richard could create.
That Richard could possibly make, and then I would have it, and then that's what this is.
And it stemmed through. It's beautiful, and the time period in which it was done is crucially important, which we can move on to in a moment. That 80s era, that groundbreaking era for this genre. Perhaps if the things these guys, in particular Richard, was doing back then, we don't know street art as it is today. He's paved the way for so many others. But what I want to talk about is the work isn't signed.
No.
This is unique and rare alone as a painting, but these sticks are a work of art themselves, in my opinion.
Exactly.
Talk to me about them.
Why they are is, again, I think it's me as an artist. So instead of the name, it's to me, and then Ellen, because she's my partner, and she obviously paid for the painting at the time, which was very little. But I think what they signify is that that's me and Richard together.
Yeah.
That's the actual paint that the piece was made from, the year, which then defines when it was made, and our names. So it became a combination. Ellen paid, I'm the artist, I design it, and Richard makes it. So instead of his name, it's us. It's actually a piece that's made by me and Richard. which is very unusual because there's never going to be, I mean, he might make a commission, but there's never where someone is going to say, boom, 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 boom. This is what I want the work to be, because I wanted it to be a reflection of our friendship and who we were in the art world at that time, that specific time.
And you pulled together your artistic, know-how or artistic eyes to create this. And
right,
it's
yeah, because I had always been a painter since I was little. I had my first oils when I was 7 years old. So I really am an artist by birth, and Richard's an artist by birth. So we share a lot as far as old souls.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what this really is a reflection of us, and this is so beautiful because it's like the paint stick, and then Richard signs it back. So it was as if we made it together.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's a really nice touch. I think, like I said, the work is unique, it's rare, it's special. You're not going to find anything out this in the world that is remotely similar. You will find elements of the painting in other works, but not as one. And I think what you and Richard done has really captured the essence of his diverse artistic ability, because a lot of people refer to this guy as the godfather of street art, which, for the provocative thoughts that he caused on the streets, perhaps he can be declared as that. But what many people perhaps have overlooked to this point is his artistic ability, his skill set. And I think this painting shows you that.
Right.
That's not easy to do. Look, you're an artist, that's not easy
exactly.
to do.
No. You've got to be a master painter to make this work.
Yeah.
So that's why I wanted that, so that we would be defined together from that moment, and then this would always represent our friendship, and who our souls are about. So it's very special to me. I think it's very special to Richard, and it's certainly very important as a work of art to help define who he really is, as opposed to only the shadow man. He is much more than the shadow man.
There's so much more
right,
depth,
and basically, before he went back into painting, we were both conceptual artists, because that's how I was doing this work on television, but it was all about this element, the use of color, the use of light. I mean, it was so complex, but it looked like a photo.
Yeah.
So we really did sort of parallel in who we were, and also because we met together through this other person, right? So that's sort of what all of that came from. And it's only been shown one other time. So many years later, I had a space in the alley that leads to CBGB's, and in that space, I did Figures in the Dark Redux. So that's the only other time this painting was ever shown. And then another artist did the whole installation, the whole setup for it, but this painting was shown then.
Yeah, it's definitely an unsung masterpiece. It's definitely kept and remained very, very private. I didn't even know it was in existence until you kindly shared it with me. I've even spoken to many notable people who have seen many, many works of Richard Hamilton, have put together the documentaries, the books. I won't name them by person, but much of the feedback has been, if it's not the best Hamilton out there, it's certainly one of. Wow, that's a masterpiece. That's a special work. Whose is that? So the kudos and the respect and the gratification for anyone that I've showed it to thus far has been all the same. It's an exceptional body of work, and not one of them knew it was in existence.
Where it was, yeah, because it was away, it was in storage. So I have many things like that have really, I buy them and they go there, which many collectors do, because you can only put so much up. I recently moved like 6 years ago, and when I moved out of my other apartment, I had over 200 works there.
Wow.
That are all now in storage. Almost everything, because my new place has a few pieces.
Yeah.
The cat's there. I have an incredible piece by Mickaling Thomas, who I work with, from a show from 2004. Now she's super famous. So everything was put away and just kept like that. So it is a hidden masterpiece. And that, I don't know, very few people saw it when I did that Figures in the Dark show. Very, very few people.
But it only adds to the specialness of the work.
Oh yeah, exactly, to the whole mystery of where was it all of this time?
Yeah.
How does no one know about it? I mean, people knew at the moment. Meta would remember because she was there, because I did show her at the time. but very few, really, maybe one or two critics that were personal friends, because we're talking 84 in a renegade apartment.
Yeah.
So how many really did see this? Very, very few people.
It only makes it more special. And your ideal home for this is a museum?
It's a museum, obviously, yeah.
Yeah.
So whether that happens, or a real collector that can give it to a museum.
Yeah.
But ideally, and now that we have so much crossover with fashion and everything, because I was just in London with Michelin Thomas, in Paris, so now she's like doing the backdrop for the Dior runway. So LVMH owns. So this is like very important. So we could have a very major collector like Pinot or someone who understands what it is and could keep it for a while, or maybe use it in a show and then get it into a museum.
Yeah, absolutely.
So ideally, we want a super collector who really understands what it is, who will then give it at some point to a museum.
Where it truly belongs. And then everybody can enjoy it.
Then they can all see. It's like finally Mr. Wonderful gets his due.
Yeah.
And then the Mr. Wonderful name is amazing, because you can, I have amazing records. And when I was looking through, I didn't know what the title was. So I always gave it a title like Richard, entering the abyss or something like that. So I went through, as I said, I have all these storages. And I thought, well, let me look up the East Village shows, because I have a file actually for every show.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, well, here it is. Let's look it up. And I'm like, oh my God, it's called Mr. Wonderful. And I'm like, you cannot get better than this. So I'm like, it's the two of us in the picture. We are Mr. Wonderful. Forget everybody else. And here's the title. I felt like Richard sent it to me from the other world.
Yeah.
It's like, you need the right title. And here it is. And I found the piece of paper. I'm like, oh my God. This is the actual price list from the
you
show.
Sent me, didn't you? Yeah.
Right, and I had it, and I thought that was a blessing from Richard.
Yeah.
There is no title I could have come up with that would have been equal to Mr. Wonderful.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Because this is how he thinks of himself, or that's how he thought of us making this painting.
Yeah.
Right, and it just was like, it's probably one of the best moments of my life when I found that title. I'm like, thank you, Richard. This is who we are. Now we can let everybody know.
And the year, moving on from the spectacular, wonderful painting, 1984, the kudos, the respect, the importance of collecting earlier works from street artists such as Basquiat, such as Keith Haring and Richard Hambleton. Why is that, in your opinion? Why is that time period so crucial?
So in the early days, only canvas was valuable, right? Even the Basquiat, the first paper one that got over $1 million, took years, for a paperwork to get. So because everything was on paper, it was almost like throwaway at that time. So people, even if they collected it, it either got destroyed or thrown away. A lot of that collection, as I said, that extraordinary show at Salvatore Ala that was in 560 Broadway, he had to leave the country. And those were the major paintings of Richard at that moment. So they don't exist at all. So when you look back, it's like, well, who had it? You have a couple collectors who were buying whatever, but very few people at that point would be collecting that. I mean, even the Keith Haring, it took like 30 years for them to even recognize the street, the subway work. And that's like the best work.
Yeah.
Other than that, it were outside murals. That's his best stuff. You can't collect this work.
Yeah.
So the early 80s work, which the 80s then became about money and finance, the 70s were about creativity. So once you hit 81, 82, it's not about money. But once you get into the 80s, it's all about money. So real collecting probably really started maybe later in the 80s. So your very early 80s work wasn't really collectible, and people did not consider it of any value financially.
To own an artwork from Richard Hambleton from the 80s, in my opinion, you're not just buying the art, you're buying that history. All of that history associated with the movement, with the acceptance, with this groundbreaking genre which we find ourselves within and talking about daily. It's got to be the biggest genre movement in art, period, in the time frame.
Yeah, I would think so, definitely, yeah.
To go from where it was graffiti, criminal damage frowned upon, to paintings selling for hundreds of millions of pounds is pretty terrific in terms of the exposure, the awareness, the amount it's spread. We've obviously got Banksy over here, Jean-Michel Basquiat, pieces selling for an enormous amount of money. Richard was obviously very critical to this movement, inspired and paved the way for many, and he often gets classified as the godfather of street art, as you well know. He gets associated with Jean-Michel Basquiat and Keith Haring often. Why, in your opinion, is the value of a Hamilton or his kudos or legacy not at the same place a Basquiat or Keith Haring is today, right now?
Well, because of Richard himself, there's no question. So there was no auction market for Richard. So you have a period of years where you develop a Keith Haring and a Basquiat market, because they're dead, so they can't interfere with the artists, they can't talk to collectors, and they can't get near the gallery. So Tony takes it and creates an amazing market for them, and there's a lot of work. Here's Richard, horrifying looking, physically decaying, still making work, and as he said, I died, but I'm still alive. So you have Tony Shafrazi creating the entire market, you know, for the other two, but no one who would deal with Richard because of who he was for all those years. So until Richard died, he couldn't be marketed properly. As horrifying as that sounds, but in the old days, it used to be, oh, the artist was nobody until he died, right? And then all of a sudden, they're famous overnight. Well, that doesn't really work anymore, but for Richard, it was crucial because there was no dealer that would take him on that was important enough as a dealer to bring him to the market where it would be respected, accepted, and paid for.
Yeah, perhaps because of his vices, his lifestyles, the balance or strategic roadmap for a gallery partnership or brand partnership with Richard was difficult to sustain.
Totally,
and
yeah.
it was problematic. Perhaps at times you hear the stories where Richard perhaps didn't get treated nicely via galleries, and perhaps it was vice versa the other way as well. So it was problematic. Andy and Vladimir have obviously done the Giorgio Armani show, which resurrected Hamilton. He did from there in start getting some huge exposure with the Armani collaboration, touring the world, London, Milan, Russia, New York, and his market significantly improved and he was back. We then have the Shadow Man documentary come out, and the same year he sadly passes away. The last year we had the Rizzoli publication done, like the Master Catalogue, which was great, really important publisher. Where do you see Richard's legacy in street art, but not only street art, art history, going from here, let's say in the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years? Where do you think it'd be in this legacy?
It should, and hopefully will, go to the same place as Basquiat Keith Haring, because he's actually a more brilliant artist.
Yep.
And definitely an incredible painter. Paintings have always been valued. Goes back to my original thing about what do you collect? You don't collect the work on paper because you can't resell it, but you will collect the painting. So I think because he is a painter and those two weren't, I mean, yeah, they put work on a canvas, but they are not sophisticated, brilliant painters. They use painting to make their work. They are not actually brilliant painters by nature.
By talent.
Yeah. So now, as I said, when you had Tony Shafrazi backing them, who is established and has the money to do it, Richard never had anyone. But now he has. So it's his time. Definitely, right up. No question.
I agree.
No question. I would say in 2 years, you bring this to auction, after this gets done, $1 million would be nothing. He deserves it, and there's always a little opening.
I think
something like this now, 5 years from now, it should be quadruple. It should be on the same level, at least as Keith Haring.
I think due to his artistic importance, artistic influence, paving the way for others, but his artistic talent and pedigree, like the ability to actually paint and that skill set. And I think that's really gonna, and I think it's gonna be a successful few years. I think we just hope as a brand that he gets the exposure and awareness he deserves. And when people talk about street art or art history, his name's mentioned. And if we get him to that position,
well, that's
we'll
your
be
job
happy.
now, is to find the right collectors. You only need a handful. You don't need like 5,000 collectors to make this go to the next place. That's why I said like Pinot or something, you need one person who understands it, who understands art and his place in history. So this is the trend. Richard is in the exact right place to become spectacularly successful. These artists are being picked right before death or right after death that were great artists in their time, could not sell. This, I can name several of them, I won't name them off, who never could sell work in their time. But now, because you need quality, not just a new artist, there's a desperation for these older artists. Richard would be an older artist if he were alive. His time is now. So this is the moment, and it is definitely Richard's moment. This is the perfect example. Every piece is a little masterpiece. Every piece is a great painting. There aren't thousands of them around. This really is the moment. As I said, you simply need to find one or two very major collectors who really are collectors, and he's on his way.
Absolutely.
As I said, 1 million next year is nothing for this.
I agree.
If you get the right person involved now.
I agree.
And it's a great setup, it's a great location, this is the right thing. So like I said, this is the right place, the right moment, the right time for Richard, everything is correct.
And how would you compare us to other galleries or Richard Hamilton representatives within the marketplace? Who would you say is the perhaps leader out there at the moment?
Well, the thing is, first of all, you're better because you don't have, it's not like you represent a lot of artists. You can concentrate on Richard. Most galleries can't. They have at least 20, 30, 40. The big galleries, 50 artists that they represent. And they each have one director and whatever, but they can never give the focus like that you can. Because this needs time, attention, and a lot of focus.
And passion.
Of course, you must believe in what you're looking at as well. So I think because your focus is so narrow, you can do the best job. You have a very unique situation with this work that is really valuable, right? And it would be hard. Yeah, I could have gone to, I mean, I know everyone, so I could have gone to Hauser-Wirth, there's Werner, and for him, no, this is the right thing. A big gallery, there's no focus. They'll throw one show and that'll be the end of it, right? You can keep working with it.
Yeah, and I think it's getting to that position now where we can start selecting which collections they go into. I think we're getting more inquiries of late than there is availability for works. There's a lot less supply or stock inventory levels available out there. And our inquiries are going up more and more each day in relation to people looking to acquire. So I think that balance is coming into situ now where we can maybe more carefully select where we place works rather than just having to deal with the purchaser who wants to buy. So I think that swing is coming, and I think he is getting more widely recognised, more celebrated, more respected, not just by people in the arts, in the know like you and I, but the wider world. And I think no doubt from here 5, 10, 15, 20 years, I just believe his exposure is going to grow even further, and he's going to be cemented in art history. I really do.
Oh, it'll be fast. I would say 5 years tops. I don't even know if you need 5 years to tell you the truth. There is a hunger in the art world that you can't imagine. This is his moment. It's just a matter of you finding one or two of the right people, and that's it. I'm not joking. I mean, it really is. There's a tremendous hunger and a tremendous amount of money ready to be poured in.
Absolutely.
Ready.
If you want to come down, check out the works on display, and in particular, the masterpiece, Mr. Wonderful, 1984, do get in touch. If not, and want to request our exhibition brochure, reach out. We look forward to hearing from you. And I must thank Ronald for all of your hard work, your commentary, your foreword, and the ability to allow us to showcase this. We are truly grateful.
I am very pleased. As I said, Richard and I are we're both smiling, and we're here as Mr. Wonderful. Back to the real world.